Could Steven Milam return for one more year? We'll discuss. It's Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. The LSU baseball season certainly has not been what any of us thought, hoped, expected it would be. The Tigers are 9-21 in conference play to wrap up the regular season. And if they don't win the SEC tournament, they will fail to make regionals for the first time since 2011. So a lot of our conversation now is pivoting to 2027. And during the weekend series against Florida, in what might well be his final game at Alex Box Stadium, the LSU fans started chanting, one more year toward junior shortstop Steven Milam. Now, that might seem like an impossibility, but in the world of NIL, there might be a shot, even if ever so slim. I want to get into that and how that may work. But let me begin here by explaining how leverage works in the Major League Draft, because this is so different from every other draft that we're conditioned to being used to, okay? And you may know this, but there's certainly people who will watch this or listen to this who are unfamiliar. So I'll kind of give you just a Cliff's Notes version so you can understand the basis, okay? So every Major League Baseball team has a draft pool of bonus money. So when they draft players, they can spend this total amount of money on their players in the top 10 rounds. So, for example, the team with the most bonus pool money this year is the Pittsburgh Pirates. They have $19.1 million. So the Pirates can spend $19.1 million across their top 10 round picks. Every pick in the top 10 rounds has an associated slot value. That now you can sign for over slot, but by and large, that's a really good gauge for what a player is going to get if they're taken in that spot. So, for example, the number one pick in the draft, the White Sox hold that pick, and that number is $11.35 million for Chicago with the first overall pick. The Rays have the second pick, slot value is 10.5. The Twins have the third pick, that's 9.7. The Giants, 8.9. Pirates, 8.3, and so on. Okay, you understand. So it keeps going down. But still, we're talking about big numbers there. So you hear people talk often about leverage in the Major League Draft. Well, if you're a junior or a draft eligible sophomore and you get selected, well, you have leverage because you can tell this team either pay me X or I'll go back to school. So that team is more incentivized to pay you. If you're a senior sign, meaning if you have exhausted your eligibility in college for your senior year, you have no leverage. Whatever that team offers you, you have to accept. Maybe the most notable example of this recently was Kramer Robertson, who came back for his senior year and was a higher round pick than the year before and got less money because he had to take whatever the Cardinals would give him, but he wanted to come back to try to win a championship. So you lose your leverage if you come back for your senior year. That's why you see most draft eligible juniors sign, because that's where they're going to get the most amount of money. So when we look at a player like Steven Milam, we say, okay, well, he's a junior. And if he comes back to school, he would lose his leverage. So naturally, he's going to sign. Unless, and this is the caveat, in this day and age of college baseball or college athletics, in this day and age, obviously with NIL, rev share, there's a real possibility that a player like Milam could make in NIL in his senior season at LSU what he might make as a signing bonus, depending on where he would be drafted. So that really is the balancing act. We've talked about other players as well, like Derek Curiel and Jake Brown. Now, Curiel is a draft-eligible sophomore. Stay with me here. To be a draft-eligible sophomore, you have to turn 21 before the draft. You hear that often, right? So basically, you either have to be 3 years removed from high school or turned 21 before the draft. So Derek Curiel will turn 21 in May. So he will be 21 before the draft. So he is a draft eligible sophomore. Curiel could return and maintain his leverage. However, he's going to be such a high draft pick that it just wouldn't make any sense for him to come back. For example, if you look at the scouting services, MLB.com, Perfect Game, D1, Baseball America, the prominent ones, Baseball America has Curiel as the 9th best prospect in this draft. MLB.com has him 15th. D1 has him 27th. Perfect Game has him 35th. So just as a for instance, if we're looking at those slot values, the 9th pick of the draft is the Braves. That's $6.6 million. So if Curiel were to go 9th to the Braves, he'd get $6.6 million. The low end, Perfect Game has him 35th. Even if he went 35th in the draft, that's the Yankees at $2.8 million. LSU can't pay Derek Curiel $2.8 million in NIL rev share. So it just doesn't make sense for him to come back to school. Now, you could say, well, what if he comes back to school, gets a sizable amount, and then becomes a top 10 pick and gets $6 to $8 million next year? Well, that could happen, but that's a risk. And if you have the opportunity now to make between $2 and $6 million, you're going to take it. So that's why Derek Curiel is gone. So the question now becomes about a guy like Steven Milam. And Milam is a little bit more complicated as a prospect. In a different era, okay, in the previous era, he's gone 100% because he's going to be a top 10 round pick and he's going to get a nice signing bonus and he's going to go start his pro career. But the question now is, where does Milam project in the draft? And is that at a spot where LSU might be able to match that number? Because if LSU could match whatever signing bonus Milam would get this year, then it might stand to reason Milam should come back for his senior year and get paid twice. He would get paid effectively for his NIL and then come back for his senior year. And if he came back for his senior year and then was drafted, while he wouldn't make more money as a senior sign, he would very likely start his pro career in AA as opposed to A ball if he leaves as a junior. So he'd start his pro career at a higher level, putting him closer to the majors, starting his clock toward the second contract, which is actually when you make your money. So Milam would kind of have that decision to make. The question is, so where might Milam go in the draft? That's what I want to talk about as we continue. And I kind of have a thought on another LSU prospect as well, who might, unlikely, but might have a decision to make. We're going to get into that as we continue here. It's Locked on LSU, your team every day. The NBA playoffs are here, and every possession matters. If you're looking to get even closer to the action, FanDuel has a great offer to get you started. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. That's right, turn $5 into $150 in bonus bets just for getting started. Now, I like FanDuel during the playoffs because everything I need is right there in one place. You can check stats, trends, matchups before making your pick, which makes the whole experience feel a lot more informed. And whether you're looking at player props or just following your favorite stars, it adds another level of excitement to every game. It's a really easy app to navigate, and it makes playoff basketball even more engaging from start to finish. The conference finals are upon us. If you want to get in on the action, you can do it right now. So head to FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, play your game. And trust isn't given, it's earned. As we often say, FMOL Health, Our Lady of the Lake, proud to be recognized by Gallup as an exceptional workplace and proud to care for the national champion, LSU Baseball. Winning programs like LSU Baseball know success takes more than just talent. It takes a team culture built on trust, commitment, and people doing what they do best. That's something FMOL Health, Our Lady of the Lake, believes in too. In fact, the health system was recognized by Gallup, as I mentioned, as an exceptional workplace, one of the highest honors for building engaged teams and strengths-based culture. As LSU's championship health partner, Our Lady of the Lake provides the medical care that keeps the defending national champions healthy and ready to compete all season long. From injury prevention to recovery, strength to performance, the Lake helps Tigers stay at their best every game, every series, every postseason run. And that same championship level care is here for families across Louisiana. From sports medicine to pediatrics, heart care to everyday injuries, the team trusted by the Tigers is here for you too. So trust the team that cares for the team you love. Our Lady of the Lake and LSU, together we roar. Learn more at ololrmc.com/LSU. We'll dive back into this conversation in just a second. I want to remind you, though, you can get Locked on LSU ad-free with the Everydayer Club, plus members-only Discord access. So join at the link in the show notes. Okay, so we're talking about Steven Milam and where he might project in the draft and why that might open the door for a return. I'll talk about Jake Brown as well here in just a second. So remember, I told you MLB.com, Perfect Game, D1 Baseball, and Baseball America. Those are 4 sites that are largely respected and considered and put out draft rankings. So we went through Curiel, right? Baseball America has Curiel 9, MLB.com has Curiel 15, D1 Baseball has Curiel 27, Perfect Game has Curiel 35. So you can see Derek Curiel is going to get a multi-million-dollar signing bonus. He's going to be gone. MLB.com puts out their prospect rankings of the top 150 prospects in the draft. Steven Milam wasn't on it. D1 Baseball puts out the top 50. Steven Milam wasn't on it. Baseball America puts out the top 150. They had Milam at 132. And then Perfect Game has him ranked the highest at 70. Now, I'm going to tell you those corresponding values here in just a quick second. But after the weekend series against Florida, this is what Jay Johnson said when he was asked about the fans chanting one more year for Steven Milam. This is what Jay Johnson said.
Somebody's going to give him $2 million. So it just, I mean, I appreciate that. And, it is, I mean, he's a great player and love him, kind of one of those guys you can't picture not having him, and we've been fortunate to have a few of those guys here in my time. But, yeah, that'd be great. But, just knowing the side of this thing, like, what do you have, 3 errors on the season, something like that, 10 homers, do a search. There's going to be one name that comes up on that.
So Jay is very clearly advocating for his guy, and he should. And Milam's outstanding. I would argue that Steven Milam is the best defensive shortstop in college baseball this year. But having a conversation about what makes you a great college player and projectability to the MLB is different, because scouts for the Major League Draft are looking at projectability so as to say, I'm not necessarily looking who is a great college player. I'm looking at who can play in the major leagues. And there's a couple of things that Milam has working against him. One, obviously, is his body type. He's a diminutive guy. You just don't see many guys that are 5'8", 5'7", 5'8", who go on to be longtime big leaguers. And you do see some guys who are primarily defenders that don't necessarily hit a ton that can make it in big league baseball, but they're few and far between. As far as the size, someone like Jose Altuve is the outlier, right? A smaller guy, middle infielder, plays second base, and also has a really strong power stroke. And then you could look at guys like Omar Vizquel. I might be dating myself a little bit there, but Vizquel wasn't a guy that was a great offensive player, but was a supreme defender. So there are those. They're just exceptions. They're not the rule, which is why scouts may have a varying opinion on Milam, as we talked about, as was sort of evidence here in the rankings that we talked about. So let's stick to money, though, okay? So again, MLB.com does not have Steven Milam in the top 150. Baseball America has Milam as the 132nd prospect in the draft. Now, if he were to go 132, that's the last pick of round 4. And the slot value there is $575,000, so nearly $600K. Perfect Game has Milam 70th overall. Now, the Reds have the 70th pick, and that slot value is $1.2 million. Okay. If Steven Milam, as Jay says there, like someone's going to take him and give him $2 million, if Steven Milam goes in with the 70th pick, and gets $1.2 million, he's going to sign and should. LSU can't pay him $1.2, and he should take that money and he should leave. But Jay said someone's going to pay him $2 million. If you look at the line at $2 million, the last slot value for $2 million is the Rays with the 49th pick at $2.03 million. Then the Pirates are at 51 at 1.9. So anyway, the point being, you're right there around the 50 range. Well, none of these services have Milam as a top 50 pick, and for the reasons probably why we just discussed. And I can tell you that I do have a pretty good relationship with a lot of different scouts. And, over the years, you cultivate those relationships. There's people who are very good at their jobs. They spend every day of their life in college, JUCO, high school, ballpark showcases, scouting talent for the big league team. And you have area scouts that when the draft comes, they report on the prospect and who they should take and what they feel like they should offer, because there's so many. It's not like in football where you have the GM and the head coach and they're the ones making the ultimate decision. Scouts have such an integral role in the MLB draft. So scouts I've talked to project Milam as a round 5 or 6 guy. And when you look at the slot values there, right in round 5, the top pick in round 5 is the Rockies at number 136 overall, which kind of falls in line with where Baseball America has Milam as the 132nd pick. Well, if he's 136, the first pick of round 5, that's $553K. If he's the first pick of round 6, that's the Rockies again, that's $417K. Now, my belief is, talking to people around LSU, LSU could very well put together a deal worth $500,000 for Steven Milam to return. So if Milam starts to slide in the draft and ends up kind of in that round 5-6 range, now you're talking about a guy who could potentially, the situation we talked about earlier comes into play. Milam could come back for a senior year, make roughly $500,000, which is the same he would sign for. And instead of going and riding a bus in A-ball, he could come back, play at LSU, try to win another championship, make really good money. He'd be a senior sign next year, so he would not get the big payday in the draft, but he would likely start his pro career in AA. And in AA, you're a couple of good months away from being in the show. So in the right organization, you have a faster track to Major League Baseball if you're a senior signed in the right situation. So my point is, I don't know necessarily that it's likely or probable. What I'm saying is it's possible that you, in this era, in a different era, pre-NIL rev share, there's no shot. Milam's gone. But in this era, it's worth watching, because the allure, the pull for Milam to stay at a place he loves and to try to leave LSU on a better note than what's happened this year might be enough, if the money's right, to keep him here another year. Now, the other player we're going to keep an eye on is Jake Brown. And listen, there was a point this year when Brown was going, before his hamate bone injury, that he got as high as the number 6 prospect in the draft. And actually, still, even now after the injury, D1 Baseball Perfect Game still rates Brown ahead of Curiel. Perfect Game has Brown as the 33rd best prospect. Curiel is the 35th best prospect. So Jake Brown is still a very highly regarded prospect. But he did have the hamate bone injury. For what it's worth, MLB.com has Brown 45th. D1 has Brown 40th. Baseball America has him 41st. So you're talking about a guy who very likely projects as a 40s pick. And you're talking about between $2 and $2.5 million. If Jake Brown is going to get $2.5 million, he should sign and is going to sign. But that's another one worth watching. That just in case the injury, the hamate bone, causes him to slide a little bit, maybe, just maybe, you could have a conversation again. Curiel and Brown most certainly are gone. Milam is the one that we could very well, come the draft in July, be having a conversation about. Now, before they get to the draft, the Tigers have to go finish their season, and it very likely is going to come to an end this week in Hoover at the SEC tournament, unless they can win it. So what does that path look like? We'll discuss that as we wrap up next here, Locked on LSU, your team every day. So LSU baseball is the 14 seed in the SEC tournament. If you're not familiar, In this new format, it's single elimination and all 16 teams make the field. You have buys and you have double buys based on seeding, but the games start on Tuesday. LSU, as the 14 seed, will play the 11 seed Oklahoma. That's a series that we saw in Baton Rouge earlier this year. And quite honestly, it's one of the more maddening series of the year when you consider how LSU looked offensively at the end of the season. That weekend at Alec Box Stadium, across 3 games, LSU allowed a total of 9 runs. Oklahoma scored 9 runs in 3 games and won the series. It was as disappointing a result as LSU had all season long, considering that circumstance. We also know that LSU did not, in being swept this weekend by Florida, did not throw William Schmidt. And the idea behind not throwing William Schmidt was very clearly this. LSU, even if they swept Florida, after they'd been swept the week before Georgia, even if LSU swept Florida, that would have only put them at 12 league wins. That would not have been enough, no matter what they did in Hoover, to get them in as an at-large for the NCAA tournament. Meaning, the only shot that LSU has to make it to regionals is to win the SEC tournament and get the auto bid for the Southeastern Conference. Well, you can't win the tournament if you don't win your first game. So Jay Johnson decided to hold William Schmidt in the series against Florida. I hate to say they conceded the Florida series because they still played hard and they had a great opportunity in games 1 and 3. Game 2, they were completely whitewashed in the 11-1 run rule. But they had opportunities in games 1 and 3 to win. They came up empty, of course. But the point was thinking bigger picture. So William Schmidt is going to get the ball for LSU on Tuesday in Hoover against Oklahoma. Now, that is a game that is the 4th game of the day. So it is a very real possibility that, as we all know, there are generally weather delays, and I knock on wood, I don't want to say, but it's the 4th game of the day that LSU is going to play on Tuesday against Oklahoma. So that could very well end up being a very late start. Now, we will get deeper into the preview of this game, but Schmidt in the Sunday game against Oklahoma went 4 earlier in the year at the box, went 4 innings. He allowed just 1 run on 6 hits, struck out 7, walked 2. He had a very good day. The problem was his pitch count got high. He threw 90 pitches across those 4 innings. Now, LSU lost that game. Gavin Guidry came in relief. LSU lost that game 4-3. As you recall, that was the game where LSU was leading 3-1, and then they gave up a 3 spot in the 8th inning, and ultimately, and LSU ended up losing 4-3. So they blew the lead there, blew the save there at the end of the game. But Schmidt was good across 4 innings. And since then, we've seen Schmidt actually be able to extend a little bit deeper. So Schmidt on the bump gives you a great opportunity to win that game on Tuesday. If you manage to win the game on Tuesday, the rest of the week would shape up like this. Now, if LSU loses Tuesday, they're done. The season's over. If they win on Tuesday against Oklahoma, they would advance to play Auburn on Wednesday night. Remember, their games Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Friday is an off day. The semifinals are Saturday, and the championship game is Sunday. So if LSU wins game 1, they would move into game 2 or day 2, and they would play Auburn. Now, Auburn would be an interesting matchup because LSU did not play Auburn this year in the regular season. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but Auburn's a team right now that is one of the best pitching teams in the Southeastern Conference, actually one of the best pitching teams in all of college baseball this season. So that would be a real challenge for LSU offensively. If they get to if they get to Wednesday against Auburn, you would likely set up a situation where, depending on who you had to use Tuesday, you might go to Casey Evans. If he's feeling good after his relief appearance on Friday, you could go to Evans on Wednesday. Maybe he extends, gives you a little bit more. And if you're able to get through Wednesday, then you would look at Thursday against Texas A&M. A&M would have the double bye. A&M is the 3 seed, very likely already has a regional host, potentially a top 8 national seed already locked up. So the real question that you ask when you get past the first 2 days is, what are those teams playing for? Because if you remember in 2023, for example, LSU had a double bye, and then Paul Skeens threw for LSU, but he threw 30 some odd pitches, and they pulled him, and LSU ended up losing the game. The Tigers were already a national seed. It just didn't matter. The game was inconsequential. There was no reason to go run up Paul Skeens' pitch count. It was effectively used as a glorified bullpen. So the point being, if you get through the first 2 days, maybe you run into an A&M team that isn't super motivated to be there. And at that point, you could potentially have Zach Cowan ready to go. Maybe you run out there Marcos Paz. Let's see what they do to get there. Look, the bottom line is LSU is going to have to win 5 games in 6 days if they want to win the SEC tournament and make it into regionals. It is not impossible, but it is highly improbable. And that starts on Tuesday in Hoover against Oklahoma, a team that won a series in Baton Rouge, but one that you scratch your head and say, man, how did that get away? And LSU, of course, offensively is dramatically different today than they were when they played Oklahoma at the box earlier this year. So Tigers will try to keep their season alive. Tuesday, 8 o'clock Central is the scheduled first pitch time. There's a better chance of me waking up tomorrow with a full head of hair than that game starting on time at 8 o'clock. But the Tigers will have to do their best to make it through Hoover if they want to play on into the postseason. Okay, as we get to and through Hoover, we'll certainly be talking about it here on Locked On LSU. So do me a favor. If you're on podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. And let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you here every single day. It is Locked On LSU, your team every day.